A woman with a haunted past and lethal tracking skills arrives in a remote mountain town, plagued by a series of brutal unsolved murders, seeking anonymity, but finding herself drawn into a deadly game of cat and mouse. As bodies continue to appear, with disturbing ritualistic elements, the new sheriff begins to recognize her strange familiarity with crime scenes and unnerving ability to think like the killer they're hunting, eventually uncovering her true identity as the notorious Ghost. Hunter, a legendary tracker who disappeared after a case went tragically wrong. The Greyhound bus wheezed to a stop in front of the Shadow Creek General Store, its brakes protesting after the long journey through mountain passes. Cassidy Harlow was the last passenger to disembark, slinging a weathered leather duffel bag over her shoulder. At 38, she moved with the quiet economy of someone accustomed to conserving energy, her lean frame belying a wiry strength. As the bus pulled away, kicking up dust that caught the late afternoon sunlight, she surveyed the town with eyes that missed nothing, a habit she'd been trying unsuccessfully to break. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Shadow Creek nestled in a valley of the Cascade Mountains, like something from another era. A main street lined with Western-style buildings, side streets with modest homes, a church steeple rising in the distance. The surrounding forest pressed close, dark pines standing sentinel at the town's edges. It seemed peaceful, isolated, precisely what Cassidy needed after everything that had happened in Denver. The air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, crisp with early autumn. Distantly, she heard the sound of hammering and raised voices. As she moved toward the commotion, she noticed something peculiar. A group of men nailing plywood across the windows of a storefront, while others strung additional lights along the eaves of nearby buildings. "You must be the new ranger," a voice said behind her. Cassidy turned to find a woman in her 60s, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, shrewd eyes assessing her from behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Cassidy Harlow," she confirmed, extending her hand. "Reporting to the ranger station tomorrow." "Martha Holloway. I run the local newspaper." The woman's handshake was firm. "Though newspaper might be generous for our weekly bulletin. You're early, weren't expected till next week." "Decided to get settled in first," Cassidy replied, deliberately vague. The truth, that she couldn't spend another day in Denver with the ghosts of her failures, wasn't something she planned to share. Martha's keen eyes noted the tension in Cassidy's shoulders, the watchful way she surveyed her surroundings, but she merely nodded toward the men working on the storefront. "You're arriving at an interesting time. Third disappearance in 2 months. Young woman missing since Tuesday." Cassidy's expression remained neutral, though something cold and familiar unfurled in her stomach. "Disappearance. Emily Ramirez works at the diner. 19 years old." Martha's voice lowered. "First 2 turned up dead. Sheriff thinks it's the same perpetrator." Before Cassidy could respond, a police SUV pulled up to the curb. The man who stepped out wore the tan uniform of a county sheriff, the badge on his chest catching the fading sunlight. Tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped dark hair and the measured movements of former military, he approached with a curious expression. "Ms. Holloway," he acknowledged, then turned to Cassidy. "You must be our new forest ranger." "Word travels fast," Cassidy observed. "Small town." He extended his hand. "Sheriff Nathan Reeves, recently appointed myself. 4 months on the job." As they shook hands, Cassidy noted his careful assessment of her, not merely appreciative, but evaluative, the look of someone who had learned to read people as a survival skill. "Cassidy Harlow," she replied. "I was expecting to welcome you next week, but glad you're here early. Your predecessor left the ranger station in a state." His smile was genuine, but didn't reach his eyes, which remained watchful. "Ms. Holloway bringing you up to speed on our situation." Just the basics, Cassidy said cautiously. Reeves exchanged a look with Martha that spoke volumes. Let's continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable. Have you arranged accommodations? Not yet. Holly's boarding house has rooms, Martha suggested. I can show you the way before heading back to the office. Appreciate it, Cassidy said, then turned to the sheriff. Local animal predation? Or something else? Sheriff Reeves's expression darkened. Definitely something else. I'll fill you in. Tomorrow, after you've settled, stop by my office when you're ready. As Martha led her away, Cassidy felt the sheriff's eyes on her back, evaluative and thoughtful. Holly's boarding house stood 2 streets off the main road, a well-maintained Victorian with gingerbread trim and a wide porch. The owner, Holly Jensen, a plump woman with a no-nonsense manner, showed Cassidy to a comfortable corner room on the 2nd floor, while providing a running commentary on Shadow Creek's history and current events. We don't normally get many visitors this time of year, Holly said, setting a spare key on the dresser. Tourist season's over, and hunting season hasn't properly started. I'm not a visitor, Cassidy corrected, taking over as forest ranger at Lookout Station, replacing old Rick Tanner. About time. Man was half blind and entirely stubborn. Holly's expression shifted subtly. You've got experience with forest predators, I hope. The question carried more weight than it should have. Cassidy met the older woman's gaze directly. I do. Good, we've had incidents. Sheriff might tell you it's all human, but folks who live near the forest edge have reported strange sounds at night. Too deliberate for animals, too wild for men. Holly moved toward the door. Dinner's at 6 if you're hungry. And Miss Harlow, people here lock their doors now. You might want to do the same. Alone in her room, Cassidy unpacked methodically, setting out only essentials. From the bottom of her duffel, wrapped in a flannel shirt, she removed a worn leather case. Opening it revealed a custom hunting knife with a 7-inch blade, its handle wrapped in braided leather, darkened by years of use. Beside it lay a small leather-bound notebook filled with precise handwriting. She tucked both items into the bedside drawer, then moved to the window. From her 2nd-floor vantage point, she could see much of Shadow Creek's main street. The sheriff's SUV was parked outside a small office with County Sheriff painted on the window. Across the street, the diner Martha had mentioned bustled with early dinner patrons. A bulletin board outside the general store caught her attention. It appeared to display missing person flyers. Cassidy's fingers tapped restlessly against the windowsill. She had come to Shadow Creek seeking anonymity, a place to disappear into. Wilderness work after the disaster in Denver. The last thing she wanted was to be drawn into another manhunt. Yet the familiar pull was already there, the instinctive response to the hunter's call, the missing girl, the 2 bodies, the carefully neutral way Sheriff Reeves had avoided details in public. Shaking off the thoughts, she grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs. Dinner could wait. First, she needed to get a feel for this town, its layout, its hiding places, its shadows. Outside, dusk was settling over Shadow Creek, the fading light painting the western mountains in shades of purple and gold. The air had grown cold with the coming night, carrying the distant smell of wood smoke from chimneys already lit against the autumn chill. Cassidy moved with practiced quietness, her footsteps nearly silent as she turned away from the main street, heading toward the edge of town where forest met civilization. The homes here were more scattered, generous yards separating modest houses from their neighbors. Beyond the last street, a dirt track led toward what looked like a small lake, its surface reflecting the darkening sky. Cassidy followed it, cataloging each sound. Distant voices from town, the call of nightbirds beginning, their evening chorus, the soft rushing of wind through pine needles. As she neared the lake, movement near the shoreline caught her attention. A figure crouched at the water's edge, a man, middle-aged with a weathered face, camera in hand. He was photographing something in the mud. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. "Evening," Cassidy called softly, not wanting to startle him. The man looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. "You're trespassing. This is private property." "Apologies. I'm Cassidy Harlow, the new forest ranger, just getting familiar with the area." His posture relaxed slightly. "Daniel Crawford, town veterinarian and amateur wildlife photographer." He held up his camera. "Unusual tracks here. Thought I'd document them." Cassidy approached, curiosity piqued. "May I?" Crawford hesitated, then nodded. Cassidy crouched beside him, examining the impressions in the mud. They were large, longer than normal footprints, with strange elongations where toes should be. "Not quite wolf," she murmured. "Not quite human either." Crawford studied her face. "You've seen something like this before?" "Similar." She carefully avoided details. "How close to town have these tracks been found?" "This is the closest yet. They started appearing after the first disappearance. Lily Monroe, found near the old mining road 3 weeks after she vanished. Official report said animal attack followed by scavengers." His voice lowered. "But animals don't leave bodies posed like that." "Posed?" Crawford seemed to regret his words. "You should talk to Sheriff Reeves, not my place to spread details." Cassidy straightened. "I intend to. One more question. The missing girl, Emily Ramirez, where was she last seen?" "Leaving the diner Tuesday night after her shift. Lives with her grandmother at the edge of town, but never made it home." Crawford began packing up his camera. "They're searching the forest, but—" He trailed off. "But they're looking in the wrong places." Cassidy finished for him. Crawford's eyes sharpened with interest. "What makes you say that?" Cassidy realized her mistake, speaking with the familiarity of experience. "Just a feeling." She changed the subject. "Is there any pattern to the victims?" "Both young women, dark hair. Both disappeared in the evening, walking alone." Crawford hesitated. "Like Emily." As they walked back toward town together, Cassidy felt the weight of observation, not from Crawford, but from the forest itself. The sensation of being watched prickled along her spine, a feeling she'd learned never to ignore. "The sheriff?" she asked carefully. "He's new to the area?" "Appointed after Sheriff Wilson retired suddenly. Health reasons, supposedly, though he seemed fine until the first body turned up." Crawford's tone conveyed skepticism. "Reeves is from somewhere back east, police background, military before that. Competent enough, but doesn't understand the mountains the way locals do. And the town's response to these killings? Fear, anger, some blame outsiders, logging crews or hikers. Others—" He hesitated. "There's talk about the old legends." "Legends?" Crawford looked embarrassed. "Every mountain community has its stories. Shadow Creeks are older than most. Indigenous tribes avoided this valley, called it the place of hungry shadows. Early settlers reported strange disappearances, especially during certain moon phases." He attempted a laugh that fell flat. "Superstitious nonsense, of course. Whatever's hunting in these mountains walks on 2 legs, not 4. They had reached the edge of town now. Streetlights cast pools of yellow illumination at regular intervals, more numerous than a town this size would normally require. The boarding house was visible a few blocks away. "Thank you for the information, Dr. Crawford," Cassidy said, offering her hand. He shook it, then surprised her. "You're not just a forest ranger, are you, Ms. Harlow?" The question hung between them. Cassidy maintained a neutral expression. "We all have past lives. I'm just here to do my job." "Of course." He didn't look convinced. "Word of advice, Shadow. Creek might seem welcoming on the surface, but outsiders are viewed with suspicion, especially now." Watch your back." As Crawford walked away, Cassidy felt the weight of her past pressing down once again. She had come to Shadow Creek seeking escape, anonymity in wilderness work. Instead, she found herself drawn inexorably toward the very thing she'd fled: a predator's trail, victims who needed justice, a community in terror. The bells of the distant church tolled 7 times. Night had fallen completely now, the streets emptier than they should be at this hour. Windows glowed with premature light, and Cassidy noticed extra locks on doors as she passed. The fear was palpable, hanging in the air like the scent before. A storm. At the corner of Main Street, a newly erected bulletin board displayed 3 faces, 2 marked "Found" with dates beneath, one labeled "Missing" in bold red letters. Emily Ramirez smiled from the most recent photo, dark hair framing a young face full of promise. Cassidy stared at the images, memorizing features, dates, details. Despite her best intentions, her mind was already working the problem, cataloging information, identifying patterns, forming preliminary theories. The very skills that had made her legendary in certain circles and that had ultimately destroyed her life in Denver. As she turned away, her gaze met Sheriff Reeves across the street. He stood in the doorway of his office, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, calculation perhaps, or recognition. He raised a hand in acknowledgement, and she returned the gesture before continuing toward Holly's boarding house. Tomorrow, she would begin her new job at the ranger station. She would focus on forest management, wildlife surveys, trail maintenance, the normal, peaceful work she had sought. She would not get involved in the hunt for a killer, but even as she made this resolution, Cassidy knew it was already too late. The familiar electricity hummed in her veins, the hunter's instinct awakening after months of forced dormancy. She recognized the signs all too well, a predator stalking this community, growing bolder with each success, leaving signs that told a story to those who knew how to read them. In her room at Holly's, Cassidy removed the leather-bound notebook from the bedside drawer. She hadn't made an entry in nearly a year, not since the night everything went wrong in Denver. Now she opened to a fresh page and began to write in neat, precise script. Shadow Creek, 3 victims, pattern emerging. Outside her window, beyond the protective circle of town lights, the forest waited, dark, ancient, keeping its secrets. Somewhere within those trees, Cassidy sensed a killer was watching, planning, perhaps even hunting at this very moment, and, despite everything in her that warned against it, she knew with absolute certainty that she would soon be hunting him in return. Dawn broke over Shadow Creek with reluctant fingers of light that barely penetrated the heavy mist clinging to the valley floor. Cassidy rose with the first hint of sunrise, a habit ingrained from years in the field. After a quick shower in the shared bathroom, she dressed in the olive-green uniform of the Forest Service, the weight of the badge pinned to her chest both familiar and strange. In Denver, she had carried a different badge, one she'd surrendered along with her identity as the notorious Ghost Hunter. Holly Jensen was already awake, the scent of coffee and bacon permeating the boarding house. 3 men in flannel and work boots sat at the dining table, conversation dying as Cassidy entered. Holly waved her toward an empty chair. "Morning, Ranger." "Harlow, coffee's fresh." She set a steaming mug before Cassidy. "These are the Voss brothers, Henry, Paul, and Jim. They run the lumber mill outside town." The men offered curt nods, their eyes assessing. The eldest, Henry, judging by the grey in his beard, spoke first. "You've got your work cut out for you at Lookout Station. Rick let things slide the past few years." "So I've heard," Cassidy replied, sipping her coffee, planning to start with a thorough survey of the area. "Best stay on marked trails," Paul advised, his expression serious. "We lost 2 search and rescue volunteers last week trying to find that Ramirez girl. Got disoriented in Blackwater Canyon after dark. Lucky they made it out at all." "I appreciate the concern, but I've worked difficult terrain before," Cassidy said. Any updates on Emily Ramirez? The brothers exchanged glances. Jim, the youngest, shook his head. Nothing solid. Sheriff's organized another search today. Holly set a plate of breakfast before Cassidy, then lowered her voice. They're not saying it, but folks are expecting the worst. Patterns established. Now! What pattern? Cassidy asked, though she suspected she knew. 8 days, Holly said, the brothers listening intently. First girl disappeared, found 8 days later. Second girl, same thing. Today's the 3rd day since Emily vanished. 5 days left if Emily was still alive at all. Cassidy catalogued this information while maintaining a neutral expression. I'll check in with the sheriff before heading to the station. After breakfast, Cassidy walked through town toward the sheriff's office. Shadow Creek looked different in morning light. Less picturesque, more weathered. Signs of economic struggle showed in boarded-up storefronts and faded awnings. A hand-painted banner announced the upcoming Harvest Festival, though the mood seemed far from celebratory. The sheriff's office occupied a modest brick building that also housed the town's small jail and emergency dispatch center. Inside, a young deputy sat at the front desk, radio crackling with intermittent transmissions. Can I help you? He asked. Then recognition dawned. You must be the new ranger. Cassidy Harlow. Sheriff Reeves around? He's organizing today's search parties, but the deputy was interrupted by the door opening behind Cassidy. Ms. Harlow. Perfect timing. Sheriff Reeves entered, accompanied by a woman in her 50s with auburn hair streaked with silver. I was about to send someone to find you. This is Diane Ramirez, Emily's grandmother. Mrs. Ramirez had the hollow-eyed look of someone existing on little sleep and less hope. She clasped Cassidy's hand with desperate strength. You're from the Forest Service? I heard you arrived yesterday. Yes, ma'am. You know these mountains. What lives in them? Her questions carried a weight beyond their surface meaning. Cassidy chose her words carefully. I've worked in similar terrain. If Emily's out there, the search teams will find her. It's not just the mountains I'm worried about, Mrs. Ramirez said, voice dropping. It's what hunts in them. Sheriff Reeves intervened gently. Diane, why don't you wait in my office? Deputy Keene will get you some coffee. I need a word with Ranger Harlow. After Mrs. Ramirez was led away, Reeves guided Cassidy outside. Sorry about that. She's understandably distraught. No apology needed, Cassidy said. I came to offer assistance with the search. Appreciate that, but I'd rather have you checking on your station first. Reports indicate unusual wildlife activity in your sector, possibly connected to our situation. Rick documented several abnormal animal behaviors before he left. There was something careful in the sheriff's tone that caught Cassidy's attention. Abnormal how? Migration patterns disrupted, deer and elk avoiding certain areas they normally frequent, predator species behaving erratically. Reeves studied her face. Before you head up there, I should brief you on our situation. Walk with me. They moved away from the main street toward a small park that overlooked the river cutting through town. Once out of earshot of passers-by, Reeves's demeanor shifted subtly. More focused, less the small-town sheriff. Your background check came through rather quickly when you applied for the ranger position, he began, almost as if someone wanted to expedite your placement here. Cassidy stiffened. Is there a problem with my credentials? Your credentials are impeccable. 10 years with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, excellent references. He paused. Very little information before that, though. Not much to tell. Worked seasonal jobs, moved around a lot. Reeves nodded, unconvinced. Here's the situation, Ranger. Harlow, 2 young women murdered within a 20-mile radius, bodies discovered in remote locations, arranged in deliberate poses. Evidence of captivity before death. No useful forensics. Now a 3rd missing, likely by the same perpetrator. You think it's a serial predator, Cassidy stated. I know it is. Reeves's gaze intensified. What I don't know is whether the killer, is local or someone moving through the area, whether he's done this before elsewhere, whether he has any connection to victims or chooses at random. Have you requested FBI assistance? A flash of frustration crossed his face. County officials are resistant. Tourism and the upcoming Harvest Festival bring in vital revenue. They're calling it animal attacks officially, hoping to minimize panic. This explained the careful language. In public, the coded conversations. But you don't believe that? No sane person would. These women were hunted, Ms. Harlow, pursued, captured, kept alive for days, then staged like trophies. His voice hardened. I've seen similar work before during my time with Boston Homicide. Something in his expression made Cassidy wonder if he was testing her, watching for a reaction. She maintained her neutral facade. What exactly do you want from me, Sheriff? Your expertise, your eyes on the forest. Rick Tanner found something before he left. Tracks, evidence he thought might be connected. Never filed an official report, but mentioned it to Dr. Crawford. I met Crawford yesterday. He showed me unusual tracks by the lake. Reeves's eyebrows rose. You work fast. What did you make of them? Inconclusive, Cassidy said carefully. Could be misshapen prints from a large predator. Could be human wearing some type of modified footwear. That's what I thought. Reeves pulled a small notebook from his pocket. The victims were found here and here. He indicated 2 locations on a rough map. Emily was last seen walking on Timber Road toward her grandmother's house, which is here at the forest edge. Cassidy studied the map, her mind automatically, calculating distances, terrain features, travel times. The kill sites are both near water sources, elevated positions with good visibility. Reeves gave her a sharp look. You've got a good eye. Basic wilderness survival knowledge, she deflected. Predators of all kinds prefer advantage points. What about this area? He indicated Blackwater Canyon, a deep ravine cutting through. The mountains east of town. Any strategic significance? Natural corridor. Animals use such features for hunting and travel. Cassidy pointed to the ridge above it. If I were searching, I'd start there. High ground, good vantage point, access to multiple drainages. Exactly what I was thinking. Something shifted in Reeves's assessment of her. You free this afternoon? After you check your station, I mean. I can make myself available. Good. Meet me at the trailhead to Blackwater Ridge at 2. He hesitated. And Harlow? Bring whatever equipment you'd normally take for serious backcountry work, including defense tools. The implications hung in the air between them. Cassidy nodded once, understanding perfectly. Lookout Station sat 8 miles from town on a forested hillside with commanding views of the valley. The small compound consisted of a main cabin, equipment shed, and fire tower rising above the tree line. As Cassidy pulled up in her assigned Forest Service truck, she noted signs of neglect. Gutters overflowing with pine needles, woodpile uncovered and rotting, windows grimy with dust. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly orderly, if musty, from disuse. A desk in the main room held neatly stacked logbooks and maps. The kitchen was clean, supplies organized on shelves. The bedroom contained a standard-issue single bed, dresser, and footlocker. Cassidy methodically explored the station, cataloging equipment and supplies. In the shed, she found well-maintained tools, emergency gear, and a gun safe containing a shotgun and rifle, both clean and properly stored with ammunition. The fire tower offered the best vantage point. Climbing the metal staircase, Cassidy emerged into the observation room, a glass-enclosed platform with 360-degree views of the surrounding wilderness. Forest stretched in all directions, broken by rocky outcroppings, meadows, and the silver ribbon of the river winding through the valley. Shadow Creek itself was just visible to the west, smoke rising from chimneys. To the east lay Blackwater Canyon, a dark gash in the landscape. Using the tower's spotting scope, Cassidy carefully scanned the terrain, paying particular attention to the areas Reeves had marked on his map. Something about the patterns nagged at her, the spacing between discovery sites, the time intervals, the locations themselves. They felt deliberate, almost ritualistic. A logbook sat open on the observation desk, entries in a cramped, meticulous hand. She flipped through the most recent pages, finding Rick Tanner's final notations from 2 weeks ago. OCT 3. Unusual track patterns continuing in Sector 7. Third set of distinctive prints found near Blackwater Creek. Configuration suggests bipedal movement, but stride length inconsistent with human gait. Forwarded photos to Regional Wildlife Office for identification. OCT 4, second body discovered. Sheriff's Office restricting access to site. Evidence of prolonged captivity. Victim appears to have been released and pursued before death. Wounds, consistent with previous case. OCT 5. Dispatch confirms no known predator species matches tracks. Request for DNA analysis denied due to budget constraints. Found unusual hair samples near Crooked Pine Trail, saving for future testing. OCT 7. Located possible site in Blackwater Canyon. Evidence of recent habitation. Man-made structure incorporating natural cave system. Did not approach directly. Informing sheriff tomorrow morning. The entries ended there. According to what Cassidy had gathered, Rick Tanner had left town suddenly the following day, citing family emergency. The timing struck her as suspicious. A quick search of the station revealed no saved hair samples or track photographs. Either Tanner had taken them when he left, or someone had removed them afterward. Checking her watch, Cassidy noted it was nearly noon. She had 2 hours before meeting Reeves. Enough time to examine the immediate surroundings of the station and prepare her equipment. Outside, she conducted a methodical sweep of the perimeter, looking for any signs of disturbance or intrusion. The ground told its stories to her practiced eye. Deer had browsed near the woodpile recently. A raccoon had investigated the trash cans. Birds had scattered seeds beneath the feeder, hanging from a nearby pine. No human prints besides her own, and no unusual tracks of any kind. Back inside, Cassidy prepared her pack for the afternoon expedition. Water, first aid kit, emergency supplies, topographical maps, GPS unit, flashlight, and other essentials. From her personal gear, she added the custom hunting knife, a tactical flashlight, and a set of lightweight binoculars. As she worked, her mind processed the information she'd gathered. 2 women dead, ritualistically positioned. A third missing. Tracks that defied easy classification. A location in Blackwater Canyon that Rick Tanner had deemed significant enough to report, but had never gotten the chance. The timing of Tanner's departure and Reeves' appointment as sheriff also struck her as noteworthy. Had the previous sheriff truly retired for health reasons, or had the first murder prompted his exit, and why had her own application been expedited, as Reeves suggested? Cassidy checked the shotgun from the safe, loading it with buckshot before securing it in the vehicle rack of her truck. Colorado Parks and Wildlife had trained her thoroughly in wildlife defense, and her Forest Service credentials authorized her to carry firearms for official duties. The weight of the weapon brought back other memories, different weapons, different hunts, a time when she had tracked the most dangerous predator of all. At 1:30, she locked up the station and drove toward the Blackwater Ridge trailhead. The route took her along the eastern edge of town, past scattered homes backed against the forest. She noticed Mrs. Ramirez's small yellow house, identified by the police cruiser parked outside, and the missing person flyers taped to the mailbox. 3 young women stood in the yard, tying yellow ribbons to trees, friends of Emily, maintaining the vigil of hope. The sight kindled something in Cassidy she'd thought long extinguished, a fierce, protective determination that had once defined her. Before Denver, before everything went wrong, she forced the feelings down. She was here as a forest ranger, nothing more. She would assist Sheriff Reeves as a professional courtesy, share her wilderness expertise, then return to her assigned duties. Getting involved beyond that would only lead to disaster, as it had before. The trailhead parking area contained only one other vehicle, Reeves's SUV. The sheriff stood beside it, checking his gear. He had exchanged his tan uniform for hiking. Clothes and a tactical vest, a sidearm holstered at his hip. "Right on time," he noted as Cassidy parked alongside. His eyes registered the shotgun in her truck rack with approval. "You expecting trouble?" she asked, nodding toward his tactical gear. "Always better prepared. We'll be checking a remote location based on Tanner's notes and local intelligence." He hesitated. "I should mention, I'm operating semi-officially. County administrators think I'm conducting a standard search pattern, and we're not. We're following a lead I've developed independently." Reeves's expression was grim. "I've requested outside assistance 3 times, been denied each time. Meanwhile, a 19-year-old girl is out there, possibly still alive. I'm done waiting for permission." Cassidy shouldered her pack. "Then let's not waste daylight." The trail up Blackwater Ridge climbed steadily through mixed forest, switchbacking up the steep slope. Reeves set a brisk but sustainable pace, moving with the efficiency of someone accustomed to wilderness travel. They hiked in companionable silence for the first mile, each assessing the other's capabilities. "Military background?" Cassidy finally asked, noting his movement patterns. "Marines, 2 tours, then Boston PD Homicide Division. You?" "Nothing so formal. Learned tracking from my father. Spent summers with him in Wyoming backcountry." The half-truth came easily to her lips. "How did you end up in Shadow Creek?" "Recruited specifically after Sheriff Wilson's sudden retirement." Reeves navigated around a fallen tree blocking the path. "Apparently my background made me suitable for a town with unique challenges." "The killings started before you arrived?" "First body was discovered a week after I took office. Victim had been missing. 3 weeks prior," he glanced at her. "Your turn. How does someone with your obvious skills end up taking a remote ranger position most people would consider a career dead end?" The question probed too close to areas Cassidy wasn't prepared to discuss. Sometimes a fresh start is its own reward. Reeves accepted her deflection with a nod. "Fair enough, but I'll say this, you don't move like a park ranger. You move like someone who's hunted dangerous prey before." The observation hung between them as they continued climbing. After another half-mile, Reeves departed from the main trail, following a game path that traversed the ridge. Eventually, they reached a rocky promontory overlooking Blackwater Canyon. The view was breathtaking and strategically perfect. From this position, they could see both the canyon below and much of the valley leading back toward town. The spot offered a clear view of roads and trails, allowing someone to monitor movement patterns while remaining hidden. "This is where I'd set up if I were watching the town," Cassidy said, scanning the area with her binoculars. "My thoughts exactly." Reeves pointed toward a near-vertical rock face across the canyon. "According to local information, there's a cave system over there, accessible only by that game trail." Tanner's notes mentioned a structure incorporating caves. Cassidy studied the location. "Difficult approach, single access point easily monitored, good defensive position." "You're thinking like our guy." Reeves gave her a calculating look. "I'm starting to believe your background is considerably more specialized than park rangering." She ignored the implied question. "How do you want to approach?" "Carefully. If this is our unsub's location, he'll have it secured and monitored." Reeves checked his watch. "We've got about 5 hours of daylight left. Enough time to cross the canyon and do a preliminary reconnaissance. We don't engage, just confirm if the site exists and shows signs of recent habitation. Then we come back with a proper team," Cassidy finished. Exactly. The descent into Blackwater Canyon proved challenging. The trail deteriorated into little more than a deer path, winding down through dense underbrush and across loose, scree slopes. At the canyon bottom, a swift stream rushed over moss-covered rocks, the water dark and cold from mountain snowmelt. As they crossed, Cassidy noticed something caught in branches overhanging the water, a scrap of yellow fabric fluttering in the breeze. She waded over, carefully retrieving it. Cotton blend, she said, examining the material. Torn, not cut. Recent, minimal weathering or water damage. Reeves inspected it closely. Emily was wearing a yellow blouse when she disappeared. Their eyes met, mutual understanding passing between them. If the fabric belonged to Emily Ramirez, she had been brought this way, willingly or not, within the past 3 days. We should hurry, Cassidy said, pocketing the fabric as evidence. The climb up the opposite canyon wall was more difficult than the descent, the trail nearly invisible in places. Cassidy took the lead, her experienced eye, picking out the subtlest signs of passage, a displaced stone, bent vegetation, scraped bark where someone had steadied themselves. You're good at this, Reeves observed quietly as they paused to catch their breath. Tracking. Necessary skill for wilderness work, she replied. Most rangers I've known use GPS and mark trails. They don't read sign like you do. His gaze was penetrating. Almost like you've done it professionally. Cassidy returned his stare evenly. We all have skills from past lives, Sheriff. Let's focus on the present one. As they neared the cave location, both grew more cautious, moving with deliberate slowness to minimize noise. The game trail ended at a narrow ledge, traversing the rock face. Below, the canyon floor lay 300 feet down, a fatal fall for anyone who slipped. Cassidy led the way along the precarious path, back pressed against stone, until they reached a recessed area partially concealed by stunted pines. There, cut into the rock face, was the dark mouth of a cave. The cave entrance loomed before them, a jagged tear in the rock face that seemed to devour what little daylight remained. Cassidy held up her hand, signaling Reeves to remain still as she examined the ground around the opening. Years of tracking had taught her that the most valuable information often lay at one's feet, invisible to the untrained eye. Someone's been here recently, she whispered, indicating faint impressions in the dirt. Multiple visits over the past. 2 weeks based on the layering of tracks. Same person judging by stride length and weight distribution. Reeves crouched beside her, his expression impressed. You got all that from these barely visible marks. The ground remembers what people forget, she said. An echo of her father's teaching. She pointed to a nearby pine. Look there, broken branches at shoulder height where someone carrying something bulky passed through. Or someone struggling, Reeves suggested grimly. Cassidy's throat tightened. If Emily Ramirez had been brought here, time was critical. The 8-day pattern meant they had 5 days remaining, if the killer adhered to his timeline. How do you want to proceed? She asked. Reeves checked his sidearm, then produced a small tactical flashlight. Quick reconnaissance. Determine if there's evidence of occupation or our missing girl. We don't engage if someone's present. We retreat and call for backup. Cassidy nodded, drawing her own flashlight and knife. Together they approached the cave entrance, senses heightened to every sound and movement. The cave mouth extended about 10 feet into the mountain before opening to a larger chamber. The air inside carried a complex mixture of scents, mineral dampness, the acrid tang of old fires, and something underneath that Cassidy recognized immediately, the metallic presence of dried blood. Their flashlight beams revealed a space approximately 30 feet across, the ceiling lost in darkness overhead. What they found inside stopped both of them cold. The chamber had been transformed into a macabre living space. A sleeping area occupied one corner, thermal blankets arranged meticulously. On a bed of pine boughs, A ring of stones contained the remnants of small fires positioned to minimize visible smoke. Supplies were organized with military precision along a natural stone shelf, canned food, water bottles, first aid materials, but it was the opposite wall that commanded their attention. Photos, newspaper clippings, and maps had been pinned directly into the stone using crude metal spikes. They formed a grotesque collage centered around three women's faces, the two murder victims and Emily Ramirez, their images surrounded by cryptic symbols carved into the rock itself. "Jesus," Reeves breathed. "This is beyond anything I expected." Cassidy approached the wall, her flashlight illuminating details that made her blood run cold. The photographs weren't just public images from the missing person flyers. They included surveillance shots taken from hiding, capturing the women in unguarded moments. Emily eating lunch outside the diner, the first victim checking her mail, the second walking her dog at dusk. "He stalked them," she said quietly, "learned their routines before taking them." Reeves was examining the space with his flashlight. No sign of Emily here now, but this water bottle still has condensation. He's been here within the last few hours. Cassidy felt it then, the prickling sensation at the back of her neck that had saved her life more than once. They were being watched. "Sheriff," she said, voice deliberately casual, "we should document this scene and leave. Daylight's fading." Reeves caught her tone immediately. His posture remained relaxed, but his hand moved subtly toward his weapon. "Agreed. Let me just take a few photos for evidence." As he pulled out his phone, Cassidy continued scanning the cave, her flashlight beam eventually revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the mountain. Near its entrance lay a disturbing collection of items, rope cut into precise lengths, duct tape, plastic restraints. And beyond them, something that made her stomach clench. A torn yellow blouse, identical to the fabric they'd found by the stream. "Sheriff," she called quietly, "over here." Reeves joined her, his sharp intake of breath confirming what they both knew. Emily's clothing. "The passage continues," Cassidy noted. "Could lead to additional chambers, or deeper into a trail." "System," Reeves agreed. "We need to—" A sound from outside interrupted him, the faint dislocation of loose stones on the path they'd traveled. Someone was approaching the cave. They extinguished their flashlights simultaneously, plunging the cave into near-total darkness. Years of experience guiding her, Cassidy moved silently to a position flanking the entrance, Reeves mirroring her actions on the opposite side. Seconds stretched into minutes as they waited in absolute stillness. Cassidy's senses expanded in the darkness, hearing registering the subtle shift of air currents as someone entered the outer passage, smell detecting the faint musk of unwashed clothing, and something more disturbing, the sweet copper scent of fresh blood. A beam of light preceded the newcomer, illuminating the cave entrance before the figure itself appeared. The silhouette that stepped into the chamber moved with unnatural fluidity, a tall, lean form dressed in dark clothing. Face obscured by what appeared to be a crude mask fashioned from animal hide. The figure paused, head lifting slightly as though scenting the air. It carried something slung over one shoulder, a canvas sack that dripped a dark liquid onto the stone floor. Cassidy remained perfectly still, controlling even her breathing as the figure moved to the center of the chamber. It placed the sack on the ground and crouched beside it, extracting a hunting knife with a serrated edge. The immediate threat to Emily Ramirez galvanized Cassidy into action. With a swift hand signal to Reeves, she moved. "Police! Don't move!" Reeves shouted, flashlight and weapon trained on the figure. The masked figure reacted with shocking speed, hurling the knife with deadly accuracy toward the sound. Reeves barely dodged as the blade embedded itself in the stone wall behind him. Cassidy launched forward from the darkness, her body remembering movements honed through years of hand-to-hand combat training. She connected solidly with the figure, driving it away from the sack and potential hostage, using her momentum to slam her opponent against the cave wall. The impact should have stunned any normal human, but the figure merely grunted and retaliated. With inhuman strength, throwing Cassidy aside like a child's doll. She rolled with the force, coming up in a defensive crouch as Reeves fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Next one won't miss," he warned, his aim steady despite the chaotic. Seen, the figure went still, head cocked as though considering its options. Then it spoke, a raspy voice distorted by the mask. "The ghost hunter," it said, the words sending ice through Cassidy's veins. "They said you were coming." Before either could react, the figure flung something to the ground that erupted in blinding white light and acrid smoke. Temporarily blinded, Cassidy heard rather than saw the figure sprint toward the rear passage. "Cover the entrance," she shouted to Reeves, already in pursuit despite her compromised vision. The narrow passage twisted deeper into the mountain, forcing Cassidy to navigate by touch and sound, the scrape of boots on stone ahead, the ragged breathing of her quarry. Her own eyes watered from the smoke bomb, but years of operating in adverse conditions had taught her to compensate for temporary sensory impairment. The tunnel abruptly opened into another chamber, dimly illuminated by some unknown light source. Cassidy paused at the threshold, allowing her vision to adjust. What she saw defied immediate comprehension. The space was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. Natural stone columns supported ancient timber beams that suggested previous human habitation, perhaps early mining operations. The walls were covered with hundreds of symbols similar to those in the outer cave, spiraling across the stone in dizzying patterns. In the center of the chamber stood a crude altar fashioned from stacked stones. Atop it lay a young woman, bound and gagged but alive, Emily Ramirez, her eyes wide with terror above the tape covering her mouth. The masked figure stood beside her, another knife already drawn. "Stop!" Cassidy commanded, her voice carrying the authority that had once made her legendary among manhunters. "It's over." The figure laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "It's only beginning. You were expected, Ghost Hunter." "This one," a gloved hand stroked Emily's hair, "was bait to bring you here." "Let her go." Cassidy stepped forward slowly. "Your quarrel is with me. My quarrel is with the unworthy who walk in ignorance." The figure gestured toward the symbols, covering the walls. "The previous sacrifices prepared the way. This one completes the triad." Sacrifices. Cassidy kept advancing, measuring the distance between herself and Emily, calculating angles and timing. "The other women you murdered?" "Murdered?" The figure sounded genuinely offended. "I elevated them, just as I was elevated." A subtle shift in the air behind her was Cassidy's only warning. She ducked and spun simultaneously, barely avoiding the attack from a second assailant who had emerged from another passage. This one was similarly dressed but smaller, wielding a crude club that whistled past her ear. Fighting in the confined space against two opponents required all of Cassidy's training and instinct. She dodged the club, redirecting its momentum to send the second attacker stumbling into the first. The momentary collision gave her the opening she needed. Cassidy lunged forward, tackling the original figure away from Emily. They crashed to the stone floor together, her opponent's mask dislodging in the impact. Beneath it was a man's face, gaunt, pale, and covered with ritualistic scarification that formed patterns matching the wall symbols. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," he hissed, struggling against her hold. "The cycle must complete!" Cassidy maintained her restraining position, but the second attacker was already recovering. She prepared to defend against the coming assault when a gunshot echoed through the chamber. The second figure crumpled, clutching their shoulder. Sheriff Reeves stood in the entrance passage, weapon trained on the fallen attacker. "Backup's on the way, Harlow. Managed to get a call out before following you." With the immediate threat neutralized, Cassidy secured her captive while Reeves approached Emily, gently removing the gag and restraints. "You're safe now," he assured the terrified young woman. "We're getting you out of here." Emily clung to him, sobbing with relief and lingering terror. "There are more of them," she managed between gasps. "I heard them talking, a whole group." Cassidy yanked her prisoner upright, forcing him to face her. "How many? Where are the others?" The man scarred, face twisted into an ecstatic smile. "Everywhere, the worthy walk among you, preparing for what comes. The first sacrifices open the door, the final one brings the awakening." A distant rumbling shook dust from the ceiling, whether natural seismic activity or something triggered. By their intrusion was impossible to tell. "We need to move," Reeves urged, supporting Emily toward the exit passage. "This whole system could be unstable." Cassidy secured both prisoners with plastic restraints from Reeves's tactical vest. The second figure, revealed as a woman when her mask fell away, continued clutching her wounded shoulder, her eyes burning with the same fanatical intensity as her partner. "You can't stop what's coming," she spat as Cassidy hauled her to her feet. "He's already awakening. The worthy will be spared, the rest will feed him. Save it for your psychiatric evaluation," Cassidy muttered, pushing her toward the exit. They made their way through the tunnel system, Reeves leading with Emily, while Cassidy managed the two prisoners. The rumbling grew stronger as they progressed, small stones dislodging from the ceiling. "Move faster," Cassidy ordered, her instincts screaming that something catastrophic was imminent. They emerged into the main chamber just as a section of the rear passage collapsed behind them. Dust billowed through the cave, reducing visibility to a few feet. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, the treacherous path along the cliff face now a deadly gamble. "We can't risk the cliff trail in the dark with injured parties," Reeves said, his tactical assessment matching Cassidy's. "We'll secure the prisoners here and wait for backup to arrive with proper equipment." Another tremor shook the cave, more violent than the previous ones. This was no natural earthquake. The vibrations seemed to emanate from deep below, as though something massive were shifting beneath the mountain itself. "What did you do?" Cassidy demanded of the male prisoner, who was watching the tremors with an expression approaching religious ecstasy. "Nothing," he whispered. "He's doing it." The worthy called and he answered. Before Cassidy could question him further, the cave floor split with a deafening crack. The fissure widened rapidly, separating them, Reeves and Emily on one side, Cassidy and the prisoners on the other. "Harlow!" Reeves shouted over the rumbling. "Get out now! We'll find another way!" Cassidy hesitated, unwilling to abandon them, but another violent tremor nearly toppled her into the widening chasm. The decision was made for her. "Go!" she yelled to Reeves. "I'll meet you at the bottom of the canyon." Dragging her prisoners toward the cave entrance, Cassidy's mind raced with tactical options. The cliff path would be suicide in the dark, especially with two unwilling captives. There had to be another way down. The male prisoner laughed as they reached the entrance, his voice carrying over the mountains, groaning. "The awakening comes! The pattern completes!" Outside on the narrow ledge, Cassidy saw what had triggered his renewed fervor. Across the valley, lights appeared on multiple ridgelines, not the flashlights of search parties, but arranged patterns of fire that formed symbols identical to those carved in the cave walls. "How many are you?" she demanded, shaking him. "Legion," he replied, his eyes reflecting the distant fires. "The worthy are everywhere, waiting. 3 years of preparation, 3 sacrifices to open the way." The female prisoner suddenly lunged against her restraints, attempting to throw herself and Cassidy from the ledge. Only Cassidy's exceptional reflexes prevented them both from plummeting to the canyon floor. "For the awakening!" the woman shrieked, struggling with manic strength. Pinning her against the rock face, Cassidy made a split-second assessment. The cliff path was impassable. The cave system was becoming increasingly unstable. The hillside below offered the only potential escape route, a nearly vertical descent through scrub and loose rock, treacherous but not impossible for someone with her skills. but not while managing two homicidal prisoners. The decision crystallized with cold clarity. Securing both captives to a stunted pine growing from the cliff face, she extracted the evidence they'd gathered and documented their location on her GPS unit. "The authorities will retrieve you," she told them, their faces barely visible in the darkness. "If the mountain doesn't claim you first," the male prisoner laughed again. "We are already claimed, Ghost Hunter. As are you. The pattern recognizes its own." Ignoring his cryptic pronouncement, Cassidy began her desperate descent down the near vertical slope, using trees and outcroppings as anchors. Small avalanches of loose rock accompanied each movement, the sounds masked by the continued seismic activity that shook the entire canyon. Halfway down, a particularly violent tremor dislodged a section of cliff face above her. Cassidy pressed herself against the slope as rocks and debris cascaded past. When the dust cleared, she looked up to see that the ledge where she'd secured the prisoners had partially collapsed. Whether they'd survived was impossible to determine. In the darkness, the descent took nearly an hour of careful navigation, every handhold a potential betrayal, every footstep a calculated risk. When she finally reached the canyon floor, her hands were raw and bleeding, her clothing torn from sharp branches and stone edges. The stream they'd crossed earlier had swollen to a torrent, fed by underground sources disturbed by the seismic activity. Cassidy followed its bank, searching for Reeves and Emily while maintaining vigilance for additional cultists potentially in the area. A flash of light across the water caught her attention. A signal, 3 short bursts repeated at intervals. She recognized the pattern from her law enforcement days, officer requesting assistance. Finding a section of bank where the current appeared manageable, Cassidy waded into the frigid water. The force nearly swept her off her feet, but she pressed forward, using a fallen tree as support until she reached the opposite shore. "Reeves," she called, moving toward the light source. "Here!" His voice responded from a cluster of boulders near the canyon wall. She found them sheltered in a shallow overhang, Reeves applying first aid to Emily, who lay pale and shivering on his jacket. "She's in shock," he explained, as Cassidy crouched beside them, "suffering from exposure and dehydration. My radio can't get a signal in the canyon. Backup should be searching, but they won't find us in the dark." "The prisoners?" he asked. "Secured them to the cliff face, but there was a rock slide, status unknown." Cassidy examined Emily's condition with concern. "She needs medical attention soon." Reeves nodded grimly. "I know, but we can't risk moving her through this terrain at night." Cassidy made a rapid assessment of their situation. Emily's condition was deteriorating. The canyon remained unstable, unknown hostiles potentially searching for them, and the bizarre ritual their prisoners had referred to was apparently still unfolding across the region. "We need to get her warm and hydrated," Cassidy said, slipping into the crisis management role that had once been second nature. "Then one of us should attempt to reach higher ground for communication and reconnaissance." "Agreed, but it should be me," Reeves argued. "You have more wilderness medical experience." Cassidy recognized the logic but hesitated. "There's something else you should know," she said, her decision made. "Those weren't just random killings. They're part of something organized and widespread. The prisoners called it the Awakening. Whatever they're planning, tonight is significant." Reeves studied her face in the dim light. "You've seen something like this before." It wasn't a question, but Cassidy answered anyway. "Yes. Different group, different methodology, but the same fanatical conviction, the same ritualistic elements. In Denver." The simple statement confirmed what she'd suspected. Reeves knew more about her past than he'd admitted. "Yes," she acknowledged. "In Denver." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and revelations deferred by immediate necessity. "We'll discuss it later," Reeves finally said, handing her his first aid kit and spare flashlight. "Keep her stable. I'll find a signal point and guide the search teams to your location." As he prepared to leave, distant howls echoed through the canyon. Not wolves or coyotes, but human voices raised in some primitive chorus. The sound raised goosebumps along Cassidy's arms. "Be careful," she warned. "There are more of them out there." Reeves checked his weapon. "I know. You be careful too." "Ghost Hunter." The name hung in the air between them as he disappeared into the darkness, confirming what Cassidy had suspected since their first meeting. Her past hadn't stayed buried after all. Turning her attention to Emily, Cassidy administered what care she could with their limited supplies. The young woman slipped in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring fragments that hinted at the horrors she'd endured. "They wore animal skins," she whispered during one lucid moment, "talked about some ancient thing sleeping under the mountain, said it needed to feed on fear before it could fully awaken." "You're safe now," Cassidy assured her, though the continued tremors and distant howls made the promise feel hollow. As Emily drifted back into unconsciousness, Cassidy positioned herself at the entrance to their rocky shelter, knife ready, senses alert to any approaching threat. The skills she'd buried after Denver resurged with practiced efficiency, the hyper-awareness, the tactical positioning, the cold calculation of survival odds. The ghost hunter hadn't died in Denver after all. She had merely gone dormant, waiting for circumstances that would demand her return. In the darkness of Blackwater Canyon, surrounded by unknown dangers and separated from allies, Cassidy Harlow acknowledged what she'd been denying since arriving. In Shadow Creek, her past had found her, or perhaps she had unconsciously sought it out. Either way, the hunter within her had awakened, just in time to face a threat more supernatural and organized than anything she'd encountered before. The mountain trembled beneath her again, and somewhere in the distance, fires burned in ancient patterns while voices chanted in expectation of something awful stirring to consciousness. Dawn seeped reluctantly into Blackwater Canyon, revealing a landscape transformed by night's violence. Rock slides had altered the canyon walls, trees lay uprooted along the riverbank, and the swollen stream had carved new channels through the valley floor. The tremors had subsided to occasional mild vibrations, like the breathing of some vast entity settling back into slumber. Cassidy stood at the entrance of their makeshift shelter, scanning the surroundings with eyes gritty from a sleepless night. Emily Ramirez remained unconscious, her condition stable but precarious. The temperature had dropped dangerously low before midnight, forcing Cassidy to use her own body heat to prevent the young woman from succumbing to hypothermia. Reeves had not returned. Cupping her hands around her mouth, Cassidy gave the signal they'd agreed upon, 3 short whistles followed by a longer one. The sound echoed through the canyon, answered only by the distant call of a hawk riding the morning thermals. Making a quick decision, she checked Emily once more, pulse steady if faint, breathing regular, then secured their small shelter as best she could. If Reeves had been captured or injured, waiting would only decrease their chances of survival. She needed to find him and secure proper medical attention for Emily. Using the emergency blanket from her kit, Cassidy created a snow angel-like pattern. Outside their location, a sign that would be recognizable from above if search teams arrived with aerial support. Inside the shelter, she left water and emergency rations within Emily's reach, arranging the young woman in the recovery position. Before reluctantly leaving her side, the canyon floor offered the clearest path to follow Reeves's route from the previous night. Moving with practiced quietness, Cassidy tracked his trail through disturbed gravel and bent vegetation. The signs told her he'd made good progress initially, heading toward an area where the canyon walls were less steep, offering potential access. To higher ground, 300 yards from their shelter, she found the first troubling evidence, a patch of ground showing signs of a struggle. Reeves's boot prints suddenly changed pattern, suggesting he'd drawn his weapon. Multiple other prints surrounded the area, at least 3 individuals wearing what appeared to be handmade moccasins with unusual tread patterns. Cassidy crouched, examining a dark stain on a nearby rock. Blood, still tacky, less than 8 hours old. Not a fatal amount, but enough to indicate injury. The tracks leading away showed Reeves being forced up canyon, not toward the town, but deeper into the wilderness. 2 figures flanking him, a third bringing up the rear. His gait showed he was walking under his own power, but with an irregular stride suggesting injury to his right leg. Rising, Cassidy followed the trail with increasing urgency. Whatever awaited, Reeves at the end of this forced march couldn't be good. The canyon narrowed as she proceeded, its walls rising higher on either side, blocking the early morning light. The air grew noticeably cooler, carrying a damp mineral scent and something else, a fetid odor like rotting vegetation mixed with something coppery and primal. The trail led to a sheer rock face where the canyon appeared to terminate. At first glance, there seemed nowhere to go, but Cassidy's experienced eye caught the subtle signs: scuff marks on stone, recently disturbed lichen, a path of packed earth leading to what appeared to be a natural crevice in the cliff face. Approaching, cautiously, she confirmed her suspicion. What looked like a random crack in the rock was actually a narrow passage, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. The tracks led directly to it. Cassidy hesitated, calculating risks. Entering such a confined space without backup or knowledge of what lay beyond was tactically unsound. But Reeves was injured, possibly facing ritual execution if the cult's previous actions were any indication. Time was the one resource she couldn't spare. Drawing her knife and flashlight, she entered the crevice. The passage twisted for 20 feet before abruptly opening into a space so vast her flashlight beam couldn't reach the opposite side. The faint glow of torches placed at distant intervals provided the only illumination, revealing glimpses of an underground chamber that defied easy comprehension. Cassidy stood on a natural stone ledge overlooking what appeared to be an ancient ceremonial site. Crude steps carved into stone led down to a floor occupied by stone circles, altar-like platforms, and what appeared to be channels carved into the rock itself. Channels stained dark with what she grimly suspected was blood. Sati, cult's lair, their true sanctuary, hidden beneath the mountain. Extinguishing her flashlight to avoid detection, Cassidy allowed her eyes to adjust to the dim torchlight. Gradually, details emerged from the gloom. The chamber wasn't natural, or at least hadn't remained so. Evidence of extensive excavation showed in tool marks on walls and supporting pillars. Some sections appeared ancient, the stonework reminiscent of prehistoric Native American constructions. Other areas showed more recent work, including modern timber supports and metal reinforcements. Most disturbing were the symbols covering every available surface. Spiraling patterns, pictographs of humanoid figures with elongated limbs, and recurring images of what appeared to be a massive serpentine form coiled around a mountain. Movement below caught her attention. A procession of robed figures entered from a passage on the far side of the chamber, walking in solemn formation toward the central altar. 12 individuals, their faces obscured by crude masks fashioned from animal skulls and hides. In their midst walked a 13th figure, Sheriff Reeves, hands bound before him, moving with the stiffness of someone injured but determined to remain dignified. Cassidy flattened herself against the stone, observing from her elevated position. The group reached the central platform, arranging themselves in a circle around Reeves. One figure stepped forward, taller than the others, wearing an elaborate headdress constructed from antlers and what appeared to be human bones. The cycle nears completion, the leader intoned, voice echoing in the cavernous space. The worthy have prepared the way through sacrifice and devotion. The interlopers have been defeated. Only the final offering remains before he fully awakens. Reeves stood straight despite his bindings, his voice carrying clearly to Cassidy's position. "You've murdered innocent women for this insanity. There won't be any final offering. There are search teams combing these mountains as we speak." The leader laughed, a sound so utterly devoid of humanity it raised gooseflesh on Cassidy's arms. "The outsiders search where we direct them to search," he responded. "Even now they follow false trails placed by the worthy who walk among them. By nightfall, when the moon rises over Widow's Peak, the awakening will be complete." "And what happens then?" Reeves demanded, stalling for time. "Then Shadow Creek becomes, as it was always meant to be, the sacred feeding ground for that which sleeps beneath. The worthy will be elevated to serve as its hands in this world. The unworthy will nourish it for 1,000 years of dominion." As they spoke, Cassidy assessed the chamber, plotting potential approaches and escape routes. The ceremonial area had multiple entrances, the one the procession had used, another dark opening to the east, and a third high on the opposite wall. If she could create a distraction, she might be able to reach Reeves during the confusion. Her planning halted as the leader raised his arms, signaling to his followers. "Prepare the lawman," he commanded. "He will be the vessel through which we communicate with the Ancient One." Two cultists moved toward Reeves with a bowl containing a dark liquid. Cassidy recognized the danger immediately, some kind of ceremonial drug, possibly hallucinogenic, or worse. Time for subtlety had passed. Retrieving a loose stone beside her, Cassidy hurled it to the far side of the chamber. It clattered loudly against the rock wall, the sound magnified by the cavern's acoustics. As the cultist turned toward the noise, she seized the momentary advantage to descend the crude stairway, keeping to shadows cast by the torchlight. "Check the eastern passage," the leader ordered. "The ghost hunter comes." As was foretold, the name stopped Cassidy mid-step. They knew who she was, had expected her. The recognition sent a cold surge through her veins. This was no coincidence. She'd been drawn here deliberately, as surely as Emily had been taken as bait. But why? 3 cultists moved toward the eastern passage, while the rest refocused on Reeves. As they forced his head back to administer the unknown substance, Cassidy made her decision. Extracting a small canister from her pack, a wildfire smoke marker intended for emergency signaling, she activated it and hurled it onto the ceremonial floor. Bright orange smoke billowed instantly, filling the lower chamber with an obscuring cloud. In the confusion, Cassidy launched herself downward, closing the distance to Reeves's position with swift efficiency. The cultists near him reacted too slowly. Cassidy incapacitated the first with a precise strike to the throat, wrenched the ceremonial bowl from the second's grasp, and slashed Reeves's bindings with a single motion of her blade. "Can you run?" she asked urgently. "Led the way," he responded, retrieving a fallen cultist's torch. They sprinted toward the eastern passage, the chamber behind them erupting in chaotic shouts. Reeves moved remarkably well despite his obvious limp, adrenaline temporarily overriding the pain of whatever injury he'd sustained. The passage narrowed quickly, forcing them to slow to a rapid walk. Unlike the main chamber, this tunnel showed no signs of human modification, a natural limestone formation carved by ancient water flows. "Emily?" Reeves asked between labored breaths. "Stable when I left her, hidden." Cassidy maintained there, impace, listening intently for pursuit. "How badly are you hurt?" "Knife wound to the thigh, not arterial." He gestured to a crude bandage visible through his torn pants leg. "Found their patrol last night while trying to reach higher ground. Managed to take down 2 before they overwhelmed me." The tunnel began to slope upward, branching in multiple directions. Cassidy chose paths instinctively, selecting routes that led generally eastward and upward toward where daylight might eventually penetrate. "They called you by that name," Reeves said as they paused at a junction. "The Ghost Hunter." "They're expecting me," Cassidy acknowledged grimly. "This isn't random." "Neither was your assignment to Shadow Creek, was it?" The question confirmed her growing suspicion that Reeves knew far more than he'd revealed. Before she could respond, sounds of pursuit echoed through the tunnel behind them, voices calling to each other, the flicker of approaching torchlight. "Later," she promised, selecting the rightmost passage. "For now, we need to find a defensible position or an exit." The tunnel narrowed further, the ceiling dropping until they were forced to crouch. Water dripped from limestone formations overhead, the air growing noticeably damper. The sound of rushing water grew louder ahead. They emerged into another cavern, smaller than the ceremonial chamber but still impressive. A subterranean stream cut across their path, disappearing into a dark opening on the far wall. The water moved swiftly, its surface white with foam. "Underground tributary to the canyon stream," Reeves observed. "Might lead to an exit." "Or a dead end and drowning," Cassidy countered, scanning the chamber for alternatives. Her flashlight beam caught a glimpse of metal above, a modern climbing piton driven into the rock wall with remnants of rope still attached. "There," she pointed. "Previous explorers. Maybe another way out." A quick examination revealed a series of pitons, marking a route up the wall toward what appeared to be another passage 20 feet above. The rope was long gone, but the metal spikes remained securely embedded in the rock. "I'll go first," Cassidy decided. "Cover our retreat if they catch up." Reeves nodded, positioning himself to monitor the tunnel they'd exited while keeping an eye on the underground stream. "Be careful, that hardware looks ancient." The climb proved challenging but manageable. The pitons provided adequate handholds, though several wobbled alarmingly under her weight. Reaching the upper passage, Cassidy secured her position and called, "Down to Reeves." "Clear so far. Your turn." Despite his injury, Reeves climbed with the efficiency of someone well-trained in vertical movement. Cassidy provided support from above, extending her arm to assist his final ascent into the passage. No sooner had he cleared the ledge than voices echoed from the chamber below. The cultists had caught up. "This way," Cassidy whispered, leading deeper into the upper passage. This tunnel showed signs of more recent human activity, modern survey markers on the walls, boot prints in the sediment underfoot. After 100 yards, they detected a faint breeze carrying the scent of pine and open air. "We're getting close to an exit," Reeves observed. The passage began to brighten, daylight filtering through from somewhere ahead. They turned a final corner to discover the source, a vertical shaft extending upward, its walls reinforced with metal ladder rungs. Sunlight poured down from an opening 30 feet above. "Old mining ventilation shaft," Reeves said. "Must connect to the mining operations that originally opened these tunnels." Cassidy was already testing the first ladder rung. "Seems solid enough. I'll check if the exit is clear." The climb was straightforward, the metal rungs firmly anchored in the shaft's concrete lining. Cassidy ascended cautiously, alert for signs of structural weakness or potential ambush above. Reaching the top, she found herself emerging through a metal grate onto a steep, forested hillside. The grate had been secured with a modern padlock that had been cut, the severed shackle still attached to the hasp. Someone had accessed this entrance recently and wanted to ensure it remained accessible. After confirming the immediate area was clear, Cassidy signaled Reeves to join her. While he climbed, she oriented herself using the position of the sun and the mountain peaks visible through the trees. They were on the eastern slope of the canyon ridge, perhaps 2 miles from where they'd entered the cave system the previous day. "Any idea where we are?" Reeves asked as he reached the surface, wincing as he put weight on his injured leg. "Eastern slope, halfway up the ridge." Cassidy pointed toward a distinctive peak visible through the trees. "That's Widow's Peak, the one your hosts mentioned in their ceremony. If we follow this ridgeline south, we should eventually reach the Forest Service road that circles the valley." Good. Reeves checked his pockets, producing a folding knife, but no other equipment. They took my sidearm and radio. Any signal on yours? Cassidy checked her radio, finding only static. Mountains blocking transmission. We need higher ground. They set off along the ridge, moving as quickly as Reeves's injury allowed. The day had advanced to mid-morning, the autumn sun providing welcome warmth after the chill of the caves. Under different circumstances, the hike would have been pleasant. Pine-scented air, golden aspen groves interspersed with evergreens, the occasional deer bounding away at their approach. But the beauty couldn't mask the danger they faced. The cultists would be pursuing them, likely more familiar with the terrain and trail systems. Emily remained hidden, but vulnerable in the canyon below, and whatever awakening the cult planned was apparently scheduled for nightfall. Time for answers, Cassidy said as they paused for Reeves to rest his injured leg. You knew who I was before I arrived. This assignment wasn't coincidence. Reeves met her gaze directly. No, it wasn't. I requested you specifically when the ranger position opened. Why? Because I worked the aftermath of what happened in Denver. His expression showed no judgment, only professional understanding. I was part of the FBI task force that investigated the Temple of Final Truth after your encounter with them. The mention of that name, one Cassidy had tried to forget, brought unwelcome memories surging back. The cult she'd tracked for months. The children they'd taken. Her final confrontation with their leader in that abandoned ski lodge, surrounded by flames and facing an impossible choice. Denver was ruled a justified shooting, she said carefully. Self-defense during an authorized operation? Officially, yes. Reeves studied her face. Unofficially, you walked away from a decorated career as the FBI's most successful cult infiltration specialist because of what happened in that burning building. What you had to do. Cassidy looked away, focusing on the distant peaks. I did what was necessary. I know. His voice softened. And I know what it cost you. That's why, when similar patterns started emerging here in Shadow Creek, I pulled strings to bring you in, without telling me. The accusation hung between them. Would you have come if I'd been honest? Told you another cult with ritual killings needed your expertise? They both knew the answer. After Denver, Cassidy had sworn never again to hunt human. And predators, the weight of those she couldn't save had nearly broken her. What's the connection, she asked instead, between these lunatics and the Temple of Final Truth? Ideology differs, but methodologies share similarities. Ritual killings following lunar cycles, specific victim profiles, ceremonial sites hidden in remote locations. Reeves shifted his weight, grimacing as he adjusted his makeshift bandage. But there's a direct connection too. Their leader, the one with the bone headdress, is Marcus Shepard. The name hit Cassidy like a physical blow. Shepard's dead. I saw him go down in Denver. You saw someone go down in a burning building. Reeves corrected. Dental records identified him as Gregory Mills, Shepard's second in command. We believe Mills sacrificed himself to allow Shepard to escape. Facial reconstruction surgery would explain why you didn't recognize him. If you suspected Shepard was here, why not bring in a full FBI task force? Politics. Reeves's expression darkened. After Denver became public, the Bureau faced congressional scrutiny over their handling of cult investigations. New policies restricted proactive operations without overwhelming evidence, and Shadow Creek's county officials refused federal involvement, fearing tourism impact. So you brought me in under false pretenses instead. I brought in the one person who could recognize Shepard's handiwork, he countered. The ghost hunter, the agent who tracked him across 5 states when everyone else lost the trail. A distant crack interrupted their conversation, a sound Cassidy immediately identified as a rifle shot, followed by several more in rapid succession. "That's coming from the direction of the canyon floor," she said, already moving toward the sound. "Where you left Emily," Reeves added grimly. They navigated downslope as rapidly as possible, Reeves pushing through the pain of his injury with professional determination. The gunfire had ceased, but raised voices echoed up from below. "Standard. Search and rescue calls. Sounds like backup finally arrived," Reeves said, "or the cultists who walk among them," Cassidy reminded him. They approached cautiously, using forest cover, until they could visually confirm the situation. Through a break in the trees, Cassidy spotted figures in county police and search and rescue uniforms gathered near the stream, precisely where she'd left Emily. "I recognize Deputy Keene," Reeves said, identifying a young officer directing others. "He's clean, just transferred from Colorado Springs 4 months ago." Still cautious, they approached with hands visible, identifying themselves as they entered. The clearing. The response was immediate, weapons lowering, expressions of relief, rapid-fire questions about their whereabouts and condition. "Sheriff, we've been searching all night," Keene exclaimed. "And Ranger Harlow, thank God you're both alive." "Emily Ramirez?" Cassidy asked urgently. "Medivac just airlifted her out," Keene confirmed. "Dehydrated and hypothermic, but stable. Your emergency blanket signal led the aerial team right to her." Cassidy felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by renewed vigilance. "The men who took her? No sign yet. But we've got state police joining the search and roadblocks on all highways out of the county." Keene gestured to another officer. "Get the first aid kit for the sheriff's leg." As Reeves received medical attention, Cassidy pulled Keene aside. "Deputy, we need to evacuate Shadow Creek immediately, all civilians." The young officer blinked in confusion. "Evacuate? On what grounds?" "Imminent threat to public safety," she said, keeping her voice low. "The people responsible for these killings aren't just isolated individuals. They're an organized group with members potentially embedded in the community." Keene's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "That's a serious allegation. We'd need the sheriff's direct order and county approval." "Then get it," Cassidy insisted. "And in the meantime, I need to know who has access to the evidence from the previous victims. Who performed the autopsies? Who processed the crime scenes?" "Dr. Malcolm, the county medical examiner, handled both autopsies," Keene replied. "Evidence processing was managed by our department with assistance from state police technicians." "And where is this evidence now?" "Secured in our evidence room." "Why?" Before Cassidy could explain, a call came through on Keene's radio, the terse, coded language of law enforcement conveying an urgent situation developing in town. Keene listened, his face paling. "Sheriff," he called to Reeves, "situation at the station. Armed individuals have breached the evidence room. Officer down." Reeves was on his feet instantly, grimacing through the pain. "How many attackers?" "At least 4, wearing masks. They've barricaded themselves inside." Cassidy and Reeves exchanged knowing looks. The cult was eliminating evidence, removing anything that might identify its members or methods. "They're accelerating their timeline," Cassidy said quietly. "Whatever awakening they're planning, it's happening now." "We need to get back to town," Reeves decided. He addressed the search team. "I want 4 officers to continue searching. These caves, armed and in pairs. The rest come with us. Deputy Keene, call in everyone off duty and request immediate state police tactical support." As the team mobilized, Cassidy felt the familiar cold focus settling over her, the mental state that had earned her the nickname Ghost Hunter among federal agents. The ability to set aside all emotion, all distraction, and think purely as a predator tracking prey. Marcus Shepard had escaped her once in Denver, leaving death and destroyed lives in his wake. She would not allow him to complete whatever apocalyptic scenario he'd planned for Shadow Creek. This hunt would end differently. The convoy of emergency vehicles raced toward Shadow Creek, with lights flashing but sirens silent. Cassidy rode with Reeves in his recovered SUV, using the time to clean her torn hands while he navigated the mountain roads with grim determination. "Your leg needs proper medical attention," she observed, noting the darkening stain on his makeshift bandage. "Later," he replied, focus unwavering. "Tell me about Shepard. What didn't make the official files?" "Marcus Shepard isn't just charismatic, he's pathologically manipulative. Former psychology professor specializing in belief systems. After his wife died, he became obsessed with ancient death cults." Cassidy flexed her bandaged hands. "He believes certain entities exist in dormancy, accessible only through ritual sacrifice. In Denver, he targeted children. Here, it's young women. What makes him so dangerous? His ability to identify vulnerable people and transform them into disciples willing to die for his cause." As they rounded the final bend, Shadow Creek came into view, seemingly peaceful except for the cluster of emergency vehicles outside the sheriff's station. The streets were eerily empty, windows shuttered, an atmosphere of apprehension hanging over the town. The scene at the station was controlled chaos, deputies establishing a perimeter, paramedics attending to an injured officer, civilian staff. Evacuated nearby, Reeves immediately gathered his officers while Cassidy assessed the situation. 4 confirmed hostiles inside, the senior deputy reported. They've barricaded the entrance and disabled security cameras. Officer Ellis was shot interrupting them, accessing the evidence room. "Any demands?" Reeves asked. "Nothing. Warning shots when we attempted contact." Cassidy interjected. "They want to eliminate DNA samples, fingerprints, anything that could expose cult members within the community. They're protecting their infiltrators." A thought struck her. "The medical examiner, Dr. Malcolm. Where is he?" "Probably at the county hospital," came the reply. "He needs protection immediately," Cassidy urged. "He's performed all the autopsies, seen all the evidence. He's a target." Reeves didn't hesitate, dispatching officers to secure the doctor before turning back to Cassidy. "How do we identify cult members among the population?" In Denver, all confirmed members had specific scarification, patterns, ritual markings hidden under clothing. Cassidy glanced toward the barricaded station. "But our immediate problem is in there. Those evidence files might be our only chance to identify Shepard's network before tonight." After discussing entry options, they identified a potential access. In point, old drainage tunnels connecting to the basement jail cells. Deputy Ortiz led Cassidy to a maintenance tunnel behind the town's water treatment facility. "There's a junction box down here," he explained, locating a rusted access panel half hidden behind decades of sediment. It revealed a narrow tunnel, barely large enough to crawl through. "This should lead directly under the cells," Ortiz confirmed. "But it'll be tight." "I'll manage," Cassidy replied, shedding bulkier equipment but retaining essentials: knife, flashlight, and radio. 20 minutes of claustrophobic navigation brought her beneath the sheriff's station. She ascended a vertical shaft with rusted rungs to a maintenance hatch, creating a small gap to observe through. The basement level held 2 old jail cells, repurposed for storage. Most importantly, she spotted a staircase leading up, with a guard armed with a hunting rifle posted beside it. Cassidy radioed Reeves. "I found access through the basement. 1 armed guard. Recommend coordinated approach. Distraction at front while I neutralize the sentry." "Negative," came his response. "They've announced explosives throughout the evidence room. Any breach triggers detonation, and we've got more problems. Reports of fires at the hospital pharmacy, power substation under attack, armed individuals at the radio tower. It's happening now," Cassidy realized. "The station attack is a diversion while they execute their real plan." "Agreed. State tactical teams are 20 minutes out. but I can't pull officers from evacuation duties. Cassidy made her decision. I'm proceeding in. I'll neutralize the guard and access the evidence room. If I secure that position, you can breach from the front. Too risky, Reeves objected. Shepard wants evidence destroyed, not the building. Explosives threat is likely a bluff. Cassidy worked the hatch loose. I'm the only one who knows what. Signatures to look for in those files. With reluctant consent from Reeves, Cassidy slipped through the opening and took cover. The guard hadn't noticed her entrance, his attention focused upstairs, where occasional noises filtered down. When a loud crash from above distracted him, Cassidy moved. 3 swift strides bringing her within range. Her first strike targeted his weapon, the second, his throat. Though he fought with trained efficiency, she eventually subdued him, using a precision strike to nerve clusters that rendered him unconscious. After securing him, she advanced cautiously upstairs, pausing to listen to the cultists' conversation. Final. Preparations at Widow's Peak completed, one reported. The worthy await the signal. Shepard expects the evidence destroyed before moonrise. What about the ghost hunter? She escaped with the sheriff. Cassidy was already moving, abandoning her firing position for the shadows of a different outcropping. The remaining 2 rounds would need perfect placement if she hoped to disrupt Shepard himself. A strange vibration began resonating through the mountain, subtle at first, but rapidly intensifying, not the geological tremors from before, but something more directional, more focused. The stone beneath her seemed to shift, as though something massive moved within the mountain itself. Peering from her new position, she witnessed a terrifying transformation in the ritual site. The blood channels carved into stone now glowed with sickly luminescence, pulsing in rhythm with Shepard's chanting. The air above the central depression wavered like desert heat mirages, forming patterns that hurt the eyes if viewed directly. Hallucination from airborne compounds? Or something worse? Shepard raised the obsidian blade higher, the moonlight catching its edge as he began the culmination of the ceremony. The worthy have prepared the way. The sacrifice is accepted. The sleeper stirs at last. Cassidy lined up. Her shot carefully, not at Shepard, but at the ritual knife itself. The obsidian blade shattered under her precision fire, fragments slicing Shepard's hand and face as they scattered across the circle. The interruption broke something fundamental in the ceremony. The glowing channels flickered erratically, the air distortions collapsed inward, and the mountain's vibrations spiked to painful intensity before abruptly ceasing. "Find her!" Shepard shrieked, clutching his bleeding hand. "The ghost hunter must not interfere again!" Cultists scattered in all directions, hunting through darkness with frantic desperation. But Cassidy was already executing the second phase of her disruption, circling to approach the ritual site from the opposite direction, the darkness and her practiced stealth concealing her movement. She needed to reach Shepard himself, end his control over the others. 3 cultists blocked her most direct approach, their search patterns haphazard but effective in covering the likely approaches. Cassidy patiently waited for alignment, then surged forward with silent efficiency. The first cultist registered her presence too late, a precision strike to nerve clusters, dropping him without sound. The second managed a strangled cry before her knife hand clamped across his mouth, a temple strike rendering him unconscious. The third turned at the commotion, only to face the butt of her rifle driving upward into his solar plexus, followed by a knee that connected with his descending face. 30 seconds. 3 threats neutralized. Path to Shepard clear. He stood alone at the circle's center now, frantically attempting to salvage his failed ceremony with a broken hand and shattered ritual tools. The other cultists had spread too far in their search, leaving their leader momentarily isolated. "It's over, Marcus!" Cassidy called, stepping into the torchlight with her rifle trained on his chest. Shepard's face, surgically altered but still recognizable in its expressions, contorted between rage and religious ecstasy. Ghost hunter, always the non-believer, even when standing at the threshold of transcendence. The only threshold you're standing at is a prison cell. Again, Cassidy advanced steadily. Your followers in town are being rounded up. Your ceremony failed. The only awakening tonight will be people realizing they've been drugged and manipulated. Failed? Shepard laughed, the sound unhinged even by his standards. Look around you, Hunter. Feel it through your feet. The Ancient One has stirred. From slumber, the process cannot be reversed now. My worthy have done their work well. What I feel is a man who can't accept failure. Denver broke you, didn't it? Made you desperate enough to try again, with even more extreme methods. Something dangerous flashed in Shepard's eyes. Denver was never the end. Neither is this. The worthy are everywhere, waiting. If not Shadow Creek, then elsewhere. If not me, then another will complete what I've started. There won't be another chance for you. Cassidy reached for restraints attached to her belt. On your knees, hands where I can see them. Shepard's bloody smile widened. Always so focused on the human element, so blind to the greater forces. The attack came not from Shepard, but from below, the stone beneath Cassidy's feet suddenly shifting, throwing her off balance as a cultist emerged from a concealed pit in the ceremonial circle. She fired instinctively, the round striking her attacker's shoulder, but not before he had disrupted her stance. Shepard seized the momentary advantage, producing a secondary blade from within his robes and lunging forward with unexpected speed. Pain lanced through Cassidy's already injured side as the knife found its mark, but her combat training overrode the shock. She redirected Shepard's momentum, using his forward drive to slam him bodily into the stone altar. The impact dazed him momentarily, enough time for her to deliver a precise strike to his knife hand, sending the weapon skittering across stone. They grappled at the ceremonial center, each seeking advantage, both bleeding from multiple wounds. Shepard fought with the manic strength of fanatical belief, while Cassidy countered with the disciplined precision that had made her legendary. The outcome was decided when Shepard attempted to reclaim his fallen knife. The movement exposed his flank, allowing Cassidy to execute a technique perfected through years of apprehending dangerous fugitives, a combination hold that simultaneously controlled his remaining functional arm while applying precisely calibrated pressure to arterial blood flow. The vessel may fall, Shepard gasped as consciousness began failing him, but the worthy remain. The awakening comes regardless. Sleep tight, Marcus. Cassidy maintained the hold until his struggling ceased, his body going limp in unconsciousness. Using zip ties from her equipment, she secured Shepard thoroughly before keying her radio. Reeves, I have Shepard in custody. Ritual disrupted. Multiple cultists incapacitated, but others still at large on the mountain. His response came through. Clearly. Copy that. Tactical teams are on their way to your position. Town situation stabilizing. Whatever they were dosed with seems to be wearing off as the night progresses. Dawn found Shadow Creek in cautious recovery. State police and FBI hazmat teams had identified the compound used, a sophisticated blend of naturally occurring psychedelic fungi unique to the cave systems, combined with synthetic enhancers stolen from the hospital pharmacy. Its effects proved mercifully temporary, leaving most citizens with nothing worse than confusion and fragmented, nightmare-like memories. Cassidy sat on the hood of an ambulance, allowing a paramedic to properly dress her wounds while observing the federal response unfold. Shepard and 17 cultists were in custody, with search teams still locating others who had fled into the wilderness. The awakening had failed, leaving nothing but a town traumatized but intact. Sheriff Reeves approached, his own injuries professionally bandaged. The FBI task force leader would like your debrief when you're ready. Seems you're something of a legend in certain circles. Former legend, Cassidy corrected, wincing as the paramedic applied antiseptic. I'm just a forest ranger who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. Is that what you're going with? Reeves studied her with newfound respect. Because I've got a department that could use someone with your skills on a more permanent basis. Shadow Creek hasn't seen the last of trouble, I'd wager. For the first time since arriving in town, Cassidy felt something unexpected, a sense of potential belonging, not hiding from her past, but using it in service to a community that needed protection. I'll consider it, she said, watching the sun rise over mountains that held darkness but no longer held terror. The forest ranger position does come with excellent views. Irrelevant now, the awakening proceeds regardless. Cassidy transmitted this to Reeves, then observed the main office. 3 cultists destroying evidence files, feeding them into a portable incinerator. No visible explosives. On my mark, create. Maximum distraction at the front entrance, she instructed Reeves. I'll take them from behind. When sirens and bullhorns erupted outside, Cassidy burst through the door, quickly disabling 2 cultists with calculated precision. The third managed 2 wild shots before her return fire incapacitated him. The fourth, previously unseen, emerged with military precision, firing a shot that grazed Cassidy's side before taking cover behind the dispatch desk. "Federal agent," she shouted instinctively. "Weapon down now." The cultist's laugh carried chilling familiarity. The ghost hunter calls herself Federal Agent. Again, how quickly we return to old habits. The voice confirmed her suspicion. "It's over, Shepard. Your operation is compromised." "Nothing is compromised," he replied with disturbing serenity. "The worthy are positioned throughout town. The ceremony proceeds without me. The awakening comes regardless." "Denver should have taught you," she countered, repositioning herself. "Your ceremonies always fail." "Denver was merely preparation," Shepard responded. "Here, we've corrected those errors. The alignments are perfect. What's your endgame? What happens if your ritual works?" His answer chilled her. "It's already working. Since midnight, everyone within 10 miles has been breathing aerosolized compounds from the water. Supply, fungi, and psychotropics that open neural pathways to suggestibility." Cassidy processed the implications. The pharmacy fires, stealing precursors, the radio tower, broadcasting triggering signals. Mass hallucination, she realized. "You're making the town believe something is awakening." "Not hallucination," Shepard corrected professorial. "Perception shift. The compound allows people to see what has always been there." A crash announced Reeves's tactical team breaching. Shepard used the distraction to escape into the ceiling ventilation system. Cassidy transmitted his route to Reeves as officers secured the wounded cultists. Outside, she spotted Shepard fleeing across rooftops toward the forest edge. By the time she reached the tree line, he had disappeared. But she knew his destination. Reeves joined her, his team securing the station and captured cultists. Shepard escaped toward Widow's Peak for his ceremony. Cassidy checked her weapon. "I need to get there before whatever ritual they're planning begins. We'll organize a tactical approach." "No time," she interrupted. "A large force would be detected. This needs stealth." Reeves recognized the transformation, the ranger persona completely replaced by the legendary operative who had tracked the most dangerous cult leaders across 5 states. "You're going alone," he stated. "I know his methods. I can approach undetected while your teams secure the town." Cassidy checked her ammunition. "Focus on protecting civilians and identifying cult members using those medical files I saved. Look for Shepard's signature scarification pattern. And if you find Shepard, I'll stop whatever he's planning and bring him in." Her expression left the alternative unspoken. Reeves understood perfectly. The ghost hunter emerges again. "She never really left," Cassidy admitted quietly. just hibernated for a while. As darkness fell over Shadow Creek, Cassidy moved silently through the forest toward Widow's Peak, following signs only she could interpret. Behind her, emergency vehicles screamed against the fiery sunset as authorities struggled to maintain order in a town increasingly gripped by inexplicable terror. Above, the hunter's moon rose over the mountains, guiding her toward a final confrontation. With the architect of so much death and suffering, the ghost hunter had returned, and this time Marcus Shepard would not escape her justice. Widow's Peak jutted against the night sky like a broken bone, its jagged silhouette black against the rising moon. The forest thinned as Cassidy ascended, replaced by wind-twisted pines and bare rock that offered minimal cover. She moved methodically, each step calculated, her breathing controlled despite the rapid elevation gain. From this height, Shadow Creek spread below her like a diorama, emergency lights pulsing along the main streets, scattered power outages creating pools of darkness, and most concerning, a strange luminescence emanating from the town square where a crowd had gathered. Shepard's manipulations were already taking effect. Cassidy paused to check her equipment one final time. The confiscated rifle had 5 rounds remaining, not enough for a prolonged confrontation. Her knife, flashlight, and years of experience would need to compensate for her limited firepower. The wound in her side throbbed with each heartbeat, blood crusting along the torn fabric of her uniform. Not serious enough to impair her physically, but the constant reminder of mortality sharpened her focus. A flicker of firelight drew her attention to a clearing near the summit. Approaching in a low crouch, she positioned herself behind an outcropping that provided both concealment and a clear view of what lay ahead. The ritual site exceeded her darkest expectations. A perfect circle of 12 torches illuminated a flat area that had been meticulously prepared. Ancient symbols, the same ones from the cave, had been carved into the stone surface, channels cut between them to direct the flow of blood toward a central depression. Around this macabre altar stood figures in ceremonial garb, their faces concealed behind animal masks, bodies painted with ritualistic patterns, visible even in the flickering light. 23 cultists, far more than she had anticipated. And at the center stood Marcus Shepard, his bone headdress towering above the others, arms raised toward the moon as he led them in a rhythmic chant that seemed to pulse through the very rock beneath her. No sign of additional victims or hostages, thankfully. Whatever final sacrifice Shepard planned didn't appear to involve more innocent lives, at least not directly. Cassidy calculated her options. Even with the element of surprise, she couldn't hope to overcome so many cultists in direct confrontation. She needed to disrupt the ritual itself, the focus of their collective attention and purpose. Movement at the edge of the circle caught her eye. 3 cultists approached, carrying large metal containers that sloshed audibly in the quiet mountain air. Some kind of liquid, perhaps the compound Shepard had mentioned, prepared for wider dispersal. As they set these containers at equidistant points around the circle, Shepard's chanting intensified. The cultists began swaying in unison, their movements growing more frenzied, more abandoned. Several collapsed to their knees, overcome by whatever psychoactive substances they had already consumed to enhance their ritual experience. Cassidy's radio crackled softly with Reeves's voice. "Harlow, we've got a situation developing downtown. Large gathering, people acting erratically, reporting visions of something moving beneath the streets. Whatever Shepard dosed them with is taking full effect." "I've located their ceremony site," she whispered in response. 20+ cultists, Shepard leading. They've brought containers of what might be additional psychotropic compounds. State Police Hazmat Team is en route. ETA 30 minutes. Can you delay whatever they're planning? Working on it. Cassidy studied the ritual site, identifying the components requiring disruption. Their ceremony is building towards something. I need to break their concentration, their unity of purpose. A memory from Denver surfaced. Shepard's obsession. With ceremonial timing, his belief that specific astronomical alignments were crucial to successful rituals. If his pattern held true here, Reeves, what time does the moon reach its zenith tonight? After a brief pause. Meteorological report says 11:21 p.m. Cassidy checked her watch. Just over 20 minutes remaining. The cult's movements were accelerating, Shepard's voice rising to a fever pitch as he produced an obsidian knife from within his robes. Decision made, Cassidy retreated several yards to a position offering better firing angles with multiple escape routes. The rifle was a blunt instrument for a situation requiring surgical precision.